My name is H.A. Goodman, and I'm an author, columnist, and journalist. Please go ahead and share my latest article in the Daily Caller, Free Julian Assange. That is in the description section. Also, go ahead and share my latest segment on H.A. Second Amendment. I am shooting a really beautiful firearm, a 500 Smith & Wesson 10.5-inch barrel handgun, 50 caliber handgun, 50 caliber Smith & Wesson rounds. And it's extremely, well, I'm safe and I'm abiding by state and federal laws and YouTube guidelines on the segment, but it's just awesome. And it's just a great, great segment. So if you're really interested in firearms, especially the 500 Smith & Wesson, there's a number of those videos on YouTube, but this is a really cool one. A lot of great camera angles. It is no slow motion, but it's just me handling a 500 Smith & Wesson, and the groupings on the target aren't that bad. They're not great, obviously, but they're pretty good for a guy who's just really getting back into it and enjoying the Second Amendment. Share that segment everywhere. That is below in the pinned comment. This is really important, and I'm going to keep this segment relatively quick. Stefan Halper is the FBI mole, the source, the informant, whatever you want to call it. They called it a dossier, which should have been called the ravings of lunatics on toilet paper. They called that a dossier. Hillary, when she heard that, she thought they said pass the Crevassier on election night when she got sloppy drunk and started throwing champagne bottles at everybody because she lost. But Stefan Halper, he is an American foreign policy scholar, served the White House official in the Nixon, Ford, and Reagan administration. So when they say that, they're like, this is a man who served in the White House for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 administrations. They don't know that Glenn Greenwald, who's one of the great journalists of this generation, has an article now out in The Intercept talking about how Stefan Halper was a CIA operative during the Reagan administration who also meddled once again, or I guess it's his first chance at meddling, in the 1980 election. So he was part of spying on Jimmy Carter's campaign for Reagan. And gee, what a coincidence. He's used to spy on Trump. That's bizarre. But the interesting thing is, and I made this correlation in a segment prior to this one, before we knew who the guy was. And the big thing with Stefan Halper is Glenn Simpson testified that the FBI had a source inside the Trump campaign corroborating collusion claims. This is January 9th, 2018. I'm not a fan of Slate at all, but Slate has good writers. Even though, Slate, the Washington Post, the New York Times, all of them, they have good writers. They just, in my view, spin everything towards the Democratic Party. But oftentimes, they don't get word, or they don't know what the future spin is. So while they're kind of trying to create this collage, suddenly when the narrative or when the propaganda or when the events don't work out for them, they then tell you a different story. But they've already published information that undermines their new narrative. That always happens. So this was written in January, but it's fantastic because it tells you that even before the Steele Dossier, Glenn Simpson was talking about how the FBI had somebody within Trump's campaign who then led credibility to the Steele Dossier. So Stefan Halper was there not just to spy, but to lend credibility for the Steele dossier, for them to then go ahead and use it to spy on Carter Page and all of that nonsense. It's pretty crazy, and the link is below. But this is Glenn Simpson's testimony. And check it out. The key portion from the testimony comes from on pages 174 and 175. Simpson testified that Christopher Steele, the author of the dossier that has become a principal target of Trump's defenders, don't you love this? This is with all due respect to the author, Slate, okay, all that. Don't you love this? It's like saying the carjacker, who has become a principal target of law enforcement, or the scorpion on my leg, which has become a principal target of, people trying to help me by ripping it off my leg. It's like, obviously, the Steele dossier is complete and utter nonsense. It's garbage. So, the People magazine hit piece that said Carrot Top was having sex with Martha Stewart, well, yeah, that's not happening. Just because something is written doesn't mean that it should be, that it should not be criticized, not only criticized, but it should not be exposed for libel, although we don't know if Carrot Top and Martha Stewart are having sex or not. I'm just saying it's unverified. It could have taken place. Let's just say it took place. Write it in a dossier, and there you go. Carrot Top and Martha Stewart, dossier time. There you go. Let's have an investigation. The key portion from the testimony comes on pages 174 and 175. Simpson testified that Christopher Steele, the author of the dossier that has become a principal target of Trump's defenders, met with the FBI in September 2016. According to Simpson, during that meeting, the FBI told Steele that they had a human source inside the Trump organization. This is a profanity alert. Do not listen if you don't want to hear profanity. What the fuck? What the fuck is this about? According to Simpson, during that meeting, the FBI told Steele that they had a human source inside the Trump organization. You mean to tell me Stefan Halper was the human source inside the Trump organization? This is a profanity alert. Do not listen if you do not want to hear profanity. You mean to tell me Stefan Halper was the source inside the Trump organization before the fucking Steele dossier was even purchased by Clinton? Or maybe it was already purchased, but before the FBI used that piece of shit Steele dossier? How could this be? How could this be? How did they justify Halper? It wasn't the Steele dossier because he was there before. Because he was there and he was there telling the FBI enough evidence or intel or information to justify the FBI utilizing the Steele dossier that, Glenn Simpson was selling. According to Simpson, during that meeting, the FBI told Steele they had a human source inside the Trump organization. Okay. Essentially, this is the testimony. Essentially, what he told me was they had other intelligence about this matter from an internal Trump campaign source, and that my understanding was that they believed Chris at this point. So they were backing up they were allegedly backing up Christopher Steele's claims because of Stefan Halper. Stefan Halper is first. The Steele dossier is second. But then if the Steele dossier is used for a Fisa warrant, then what did Stefan Halper use to justify the FBI using the Steele dossier to justify then the Fisa warrant? This is I just want to make this to the point. Give me your thoughts below. And then he declines to, security. I can't tell you because of security. Everybody knows. Guy is a professor. He meddled in the 1980 election. Give me your thoughts below. The key portion of the testimony comes on pages 174 and 175. Simpson testified that Christopher Steele, the author of the dossier that has become a principal target of Trump's defenders, met with the FBI in September 2016. According to Simpson, during that meeting, the FBI told Steele they had a human source inside the Trump organization, which was why they were investigating the claims in his own report and taking them seriously. Why are they utilizing this man, Stefan Halper, before utilizing the Steele dossier? Give me your answer to that question below in the comments right now. Share my segment on H.A. Goodman, Second Amendment, firing of 500 Smith & Wesson. Thank you so much for listening.